Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the great outdoors. In this episode, we continue our celebration of the National Marine Sanctuary's 50th year of ocean conservation and stewardship. Our guest today on the Outdoor Adventure Series is Jeff Gray. Jeff is the superintendent at the ThunderBay National Marine Sanctuary, an underwater museum in a section of Lake Huron. Now, nestled up against the shores of northeastern Michigan are nearly 100 known shipwrecks. Rumor has it they just found a new one. Now, these shipwrecks tell the story of the Great Lakes maritime history. And Jeff, I'm so glad you're on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast to help celebrate the National Marine Sanctuaries and to share about the ThunderBay National Marine Sanctuary. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for having us. And we're hoping we can share a little bit about the Great Lakes and just how spectacular they are and the history that's hidden below those waves.
Fantastic. Now, what I like to do before we really dive into the sanctuary itself is to get a little bit of a background from my guest. And if you wouldn't mind, just a 30,000 foot view, share a little bit about your background and kind of that journey as you made your way eventually to be up in Northeast Michigan at the ThunderBay National Marine Sanctuary.
Yeah, very lucky to be here. It was a great journey. I grew up in Michigan, Southeast Michigan. Grew up in Detroit. For anybody there, down here, just right outside of Detroit.
I know that. I know that.
The great state of Michigan, and grew up. And I actually went to school to be an engineer, but in Beloit College, and I was taking classes, took a couple of electives in archaeology, and just fell in love with archaeology and learned about the discipline. And as took a couple more, I realized, hey, this could be a career. And then at some point, you had to decide what specialties you wanted into. And I read about underwater archaeology and decided to give that a shot. I wasn't a diver. I wasn't a sailor, but took up all those things later. And I went to East Carolina University down in Greenville, North Carolina, got a master's degree in maritime history and underwater archaeology. But I love history. I love archaeology. I love the Great Lakes, and I looked for a way to put those things together. And I got fortunate to be some people that mentored me in Wisconsin, and worked for the state of Wisconsin for about 6 years as a state underwater archaeologist, and came to work here in Alpena in 2002. So just a little over 20 years ago, I walked through the doors of the sanctuary for the first time. So
That is fantastic. And I'd like to, if we could, just circle back and unpack a little bit. One aspect of the National Marine Sanctuaries that I have been fascinated by is up until I heard Grace Botita Williamson speak at the Outdoor Writers Association's midweek virtual meeting, I had never heard of the National Marine Sanctuaries. I know of national parks. I live in Vegas and I visit Death Valley and the Big Five in Utah, et cetera. I never knew there were national marine sanctuaries. And so that for me is really an eye opener. And then when I saw the grand map
yes,
of the sanctuaries, I was like, wait a minute, ThunderBay. I know where ThunderBay is.
right in the middle.
Right in the middle. And it's
Yeah.
like, and now you now introduce this aspect of archaeology. When I think of archaeology, probably like a lot of people, we think of Indiana Jones. He kind of made it kind of in vogue. Now you don't wear a hat like his, do you?
Underwater whip. We had underwater whips, the hat, everything. So yeah.
All right. I love it. We're going to need some photos for our website. But talk to us a little bit about what is underwater archaeology? What's the premise and the discipline behind it?
Yeah. So basically, it's just another way of studying the past. If we think of history as we learn about the past through the written word, archaeology, we do it through artifacts and archaeological sites and the physical record left behind by people. Underwater archaeology, much of underwater archaeology is historical archaeology, where you put the discipline of history with archaeology together, where you're studying these amazing archaeological sites that have been left behind underwater. Some of those could be docks and piers, or something where places have become inundated. A lot of what we focus on here are the shipwrecks. There's nearly 200 shipwrecks we believe in the sanctuary. About 100 of those have been found, which means there's still about 100 more left to be found. So what we do is we look at these sites to learn about the past. And when you think about ships and shipping, for most of our history, the ship was the most technologically advanced thing there was that existed. So we can learn about the technology that drove the day, but we also learn about the people, all of the belongings, the captains, the crew, the passengers on the vessel, a lot of their personal effects there. So we can learn about what people's everyday lives were like. And if we I I'm on Lake Huron. I don't think we said that's we're up in northern Michigan, up on Lake Huron, and the Great Lakes really fueled the fire of the Industrial Revolution. So the ships that happened, most of them happened in about a 100-year period between 1825 and 1925, and that's a time that just changed not just this region but the nation. And it was driven by the amazing body of water back there, the Great Lakes, that let this country grow into what it is today.
I'm reminded now, there's an old Jimmy Buffett song of "Sail the Oceans, Go from Sail to Steam."
Yeah,
Same thing on the Great Lakes. You
yeah,
start with wooden boats, then ironclad, and
yeah,
going from sail to steam, and then of course the tragedies that happen.
yeah.
And that I think like every November I go and find Gordon Lightfoot and just kind of
Right.
play that
Yes.
song
Yeah.
for about a week. Was it Gales of November?
Yeah.
And as an archaeologist and being interested in the maritime aspect of it, obviously there are scientists out there, scientists who, besides the fact they're pretty capable divers, what are they actually going down to explore when they are perhaps a shipwreck has been discovered?
Right.
Okay, like you said, there's 100 known ones, perhaps a new one was just discovered. But when they get down there, what are they looking at? What are the things? I mean, I imagine there's a group of scientists, not just one.
Yep.
What are some of the things that are being looked at, cataloged? Are you bringing artifacts up to study them? What are some of those activities?
That's an awesome question, and it's really every researcher has a different angle they're looking at. And the river behind you in the image, that's our building there. That's the Thunder Bay River. In 1870, that river would have been lined with schooners and steamers, and like that. It was so much a part of what we're doing, and what in the history part, the archaeology part, we're trying to learn about that time period better, understand it. And so, some researchers may be going down to learn about why the vessel sank. Some may be looking at studying the ship construction of a type of vessel. They want to learn about that type. We've had some researchers that are looking at the cargo or grain to try to do DNA studies for something that's not really anything to do with the shipping, but this is a sample from 1870 sitting there. We have a team here right now from across the country that's looking at some of our deep water wrecks from about 170 to 300 feet of water, where they're actually going and they're doing DNA sampling. They're going to see if they can find any remnants of those that lost their life on the vessel. And they're doing that to help with Department of Defense work, trying to recover lost sailors out in other places. And they're doing it as a testing. So some are doing testing technologies, some are deep in the history and the archaeology of a ship. Others are looking at what's going on in the Great Lakes. And what we do here is we try to coordinate those. We make it as easy as possible for people to come here and study these ships. But the reason we want that is so people can enjoy them. Our job, our real job here is to protect the Great Lakes and the rich history that's lying below the lakes. And we do that by better understanding them. And if we can attract scientists from around the world to come here, that helps us do our job.
Fantastic. Now, 20 years at Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and before it became a sanctuary or a named sanctuary,
Yeah.
how, well, as a superintendent, what are some of the roles and responsibilities you have i-
Yeah,
uh, in the day-to-day work?
yeah, and so you talked about national parks in the beginning, and it's an easy way to think of a marine sanctuary is we're a national park run by a different part of the government, but we protect America's ocean and Great Lakes treasures. And so what makes this place special is that incredible collection of shipwrecks. And so we work to protect the Great Lakes and their rich history. Hopefully I say that over and over again. And we do that really through a couple different ways, few different ways. Research and monitoring, we talked about that. We need to know where these sites are. We need to understand how they're changing over time. Education and outreach, that is a huge component of what we do. And hopefully we'll have some time to talk about that. That building behind you is our visitor center where you get about 100,000 people that come through here to learn about this place, learn how they can better protect the Great Lakes, and then our resource protection programs. And when you introduce what the reason for your podcast, you talked about stewardship and conservation and access. All of those things are what we do. We're trying to give people better access to these sites. We 1000% believe that the best way to protect these sites is to get people to care about them. The best way to get people to care about them is get them out and have them experience, but make sure they do it in a way so the next generation of divers can visit them the same way we do today.